Uniquely.
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 Issaquah. Hello and welcome to Uniquely Issaquah, a podcast about people, places, and things that make Issaquah unique. I'm your host, Timothy Smith, and joining us on this episode is our returning champion, Erica Manias, the director of Issaquah History Museums, and a new voice, Corey Walters, executive director of the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank. Welcome, Corey, and welcome, Erica.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Erica, I think we'll start off with you to explain the premise of this specific podcast and why we have been joined by the director of the History Museums and the director of the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank together in this one podcast.
Well, we kind of traced the beginnings of this back to a project that we set up through For Culture. For Culture is the granting arm of King County for their lodging tax, and they've got a variety of different grant programs. One of them is to encourage heritage organizations and artists to work together on things that incorporate both arts and culture. And so we had applied for a grant to work with an artist named Sean Dahl, who does encaustic art, and he has a series of works that he's done that are based on different hobo graffiti. So this is something that he's been interested in. So Issaquah,
Quick question.
Yes.
What's the kind of art?
Encaustic,
What's
which is
encaustic?
it's wax-based art.
Oh, okay.
So there are a couple different ways to do it, but it's the way he does it. It's kind of a thick paint kind of consistency that he works with. So it's really interesting stuff. It's all kind of beeswax based. Beeswax based.
Yeah, sorry, I just had never heard that term.
Yeah. So he had this series of works based on hobo graffiti, and so we received funding from For Culture and from the Issaquah Arts Foundation to create both an exhibit and then also a program that kind of talked about some of the different themes. So since Issaquah did have a population of hobos during the times that hobos were around, we decided this would be a fun way to kind of examine the history of hobos in the community, and then also to kind of contrast that with the contemporary challenges of homelessness in the community, because I think that it's fairly well known that Issaquah has a growing population of people without homes in it. And Corey will talk more to that. But so we received funding and installed the exhibit, and one of the things that we talked about at the opening were the art itself and the inspiration for it, and then also sort of the history of hobos in general and then hobos in Issaquah. So hobo graffiti, I think, is something most people are familiar with, but it's a series of different signs and symbols that hobos developed in order to keep each other informed and help keep each other safe as they're navigating this world where they're traveling on trains and they don't have a lot of support or comforts. So they depended a lot on asking people for food or finding work or that kind of thing. And so hobo graffiti developed because it was something that helped them navigate kind of the challenges of their life.
So it was their own language, basically.
Kind of, yeah.
In a way.
And a lot of the signs and symbols varied depending on what part of the country you were in. And it's a really interesting code. So, and that it also taps in a little bit the fascination that we have with hobo graffiti and hobos in general. Kind of taps into our public fascination with hobos, this sort of romantic idea of being out on the rails, you know, you don't have any possessions, you're a free spirit. And so some of the research that we did for this seemed to sort of echo that. We had some oral history and memory book memories that people had offered where they talked about how they remembered the hobo camp that was here in Issaquah. Maybe they walked past them on their way to school, and there were references to them as the Knights of the Open Road, and it was very much this sort of romantic feel. And so I realized when I started doing research on actual hobos, the time period we'd gathered this information from was the people we talked to were all kids at that time period.
Oh, right.
And so they had a very different perception of hobos. There was sort of a romance and a mystique. And as we started looking at the real history of hobos in America, of course, it was not as romantic at all as what we assume. And there was a really great quote that I found that said, "For every mile of beautiful scenery and warm sunshine, there are hundreds of miles of cold, dark nights, no food, and no one to care whether I live or die." And so as we started sort of unraveling some of these kind of legends or fables of the hobo life, it became clear that being a hobo is actually really dangerous, particularly if you were female or a minority.
Oh, yeah.
You were constantly trying to hide from what were called railroad bulls, and their job was to make sure nobody was hopping on and off the train. And there was what one source referred to as a, quote, strong tradition of violence among railroad bulls. So it was not uncommon to get run off a train, perhaps shot at, and then, of course, riding the rails has a whole set of its own dangers of just slipping and falling and losing a limb or ending up in the train. And, I mean, not your first choice for a vacation away from home.
No, you're not taking the family and go, let's have the hobo experience.
Right, yeah. And so once we'd sort of pulled this apart and looked at the full experience, it looked a lot more like what contemporary homelessness looks like than it did something romantic. So as we were developing this whole idea, I had gotten in touch with Corey because I felt like this was something that was really connected. We were talking about similar people separated, by 75 years or so, and just a difference in life ways. So
when you did the research, was the hobo, the traveling the hobo, were they just nomads moving from place to place, or were they actually looking for work?
They were mostly looking for work. So the first migrant laborers really in the United States were hobos. So there began, the term was coined in the late 1860s, and the first hobos were really men returning from the Civil War. And this was the first time that the trains could be used informally as transportation. So they were trying to get home. And then later, as westward expansion happened and the railroads expanded farther west, there were more jobs and also more means of getting there. So this is where we start seeing people traveling long distances to get from a place that had work to another place that had work.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and during the Depression, also, aside from just going from place to place looking for work, there were also a lot of young people in their late teens, early 20s who were maybe living at home, and their parents had gotten to the point where they could no longer support them. And so they basically said, you need to hit the road.
Yeah.
And,
So the hobos in Issaquah, did they come here mainly for mining maybe or something like that, or...
No, most of the hobos, I think, were passing through the area a little bit later. So a lot of it was looking for work, looking for food. Again, during the Depression, the town marshal here actually would let vagrants stay overnight in the jail if there weren't anybody else there. So we don't know a whole lot about the hobos as individuals. Anybody who's transient from place to place and doesn't have a lot of interaction with, legal systems and land purchases and that kind of thing, it's pretty easy for them to slip under the radar of the historical record.
Right. And so, like you were saying, when you did all this research, you kind of saw, you demystified it, de-romanced it, and kind of saw the connection to where to our homeless issue today, right? So, and that's where Corey kind of comes in, right?
Yeah. So I was asked to come and speak about maybe the realities of what it looks like today to live without a house, and I often get asked to speak about demystifying the myths of homelessness. Like, there's a lot of myths that it's all males, that it's people who are uneducated, people who are maybe lazy or intentionally unemployed, people who are drug addicts or mentally ill. There's a myth that people who live outside or live without homes are choosing to live there because
they want to live under the stars.
Because they want to,
Yeah.
Which kind of matches some of the myths about hobo life. But the realities are a lot of our homeless people are people who are educated, who maybe have worked and are just currently unemployed, or maybe they even are employed but they're underemployed. We have families who are homeless. We have our highest growing population of homeless are women and children.
Wow.
And so it's often, we have this vision that it's the guy you might see downtown.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the whole picture. And so we make a lot of assumptions and we have a lot of misperceptions about what it is. And I kind of like to challenge people to put on another hat and like look at this through another lens.
Right.
And
yeah, I mean, I know I have my perceptions of homelessness, and it's the guy with a knapsack on his back sitting at the intersection with a sign, or living under a bridge, or a lady with a cart or something like that. But I don't imagine a family with small kids, because you don't see it, so much. They're not out in front of you, and so it's good. It's interesting to know that that's a bigger and bigger percentage of the homeless people are women with kids and stuff like that. And it's I guess my question is like, we don't see it, so how do we know? How do we connect to that as people and do something about it, or get that word out, I guess.
That's a really hard part.
Yeah.
There's no like cookie cutter perfect answer. I think one thing I say is, often look around you and look at your social network and the people you connect with every day, and think about all of their individual stories that got them to that place. And then when you look at our families who are living without roofs over their heads, or individuals without roofs over their head, they have just as many different stories as to why they're where they're at as your friends have different stories how they ended up where they're at. And so people end up in that situation for a lot of reasons. It could be mental health and not having an ability to get into a program that they need, or drug addiction and lack of inpatient care or treatment facilities. But it often can be domestic violence. It can be a loss of a job. It can be a health issue. And, we have families who have had a major medical issue that has caused them to tap into their the
minimal resources that they had.
Yeah, they use all of their retirement funds and they sell everything they own to like help their family get past this ailment. And then what do they have? And so homelessness might be it is the people that you see on the streets, but we have a huge population that are couch surfing, that are have multi-families in one house. People living in their cars, and those are the harder ones to see. And I guess the best way to reach out and get connected with the need and what's really going on is to really humanize the issue.
Yeah.
So, like, let's look at each of these people that we see and hear about and understand their story. Because if we treat them if we romanticize somebody's lifestyle or make assumptions like we have about the hobo life, then we're missing like what the realities of today are and why people are there and what their stories are and who they are.
Right. And, especially in Issaquah, I think there's a perception that, they camp up in the hills and then they come down during the day. What a great life. They're camping homeless. They're not under threat of, in downtown Seattle where it might be a little more dangerous. You know what I mean? I think there's a slight perception that's the homeless that live here. It's not the mom who lost her job and is now in a car with her two kids because she was living paycheck to paycheck, or like you said, somebody who are family who was living paycheck to paycheck and there was illness, and just like you said. And I think in a lot of ways, and I'm just kind of spouting my personal experience, is that when you see someone, you have your personal biases immediately exposed. It's like, get a job. Oh, you wrote a nice sign. It's just all these terrible things that come to your head because you don't want to deal with it as a society, as a person. You want to move beyond it.
I was thinking something really similar, actually, as Corey was talking about how we see this. I think it's interesting in some ways. Of course, Corey's much more kind of boots on the ground with this, but part of both of our jobs is to get people to look at individual lives and understand, how detailed and how different that can be. But I feel like when there's an overwhelming problem, we try to simplify it. We put a lot of assumptions together so that we can explain it away and make it not our problem. So we have this story that we come up with, and I'm familiar with some of the ones that you're talking about too. The one that I hear a lot, or kind of feel a lot. It's sometimes they aren't completely articulated, but this idea that that the homeless problem in Issaquah is from somewhere else, that these are not actually Issaquahans that are homeless. These are people from outside the community, and that was one of the things that that Corey tackled at the presentation, that a lot of these people are here. They've been here all their lives. They've grown up here.
Right.
So there are homeless.
Yeah. And people don't, especially, and people don't want to think that. They don't want to think, well, Issaquah isn't a homeless problem. We have homeless people coming here. That's our homeless problem.
Yeah.
Right?
The truth is a lot of the kids that we see on the street and a lot of the people who come from the hills have roots here. This is their home.
Right.
And I think that people might be uncomfortable with that for a variety of reasons. And I mean, in some ways I can kind of understand that. There's a fear, like, there might be a deeper layer of fear. If that can happen to somebody else, this might be something that could happen to me.
True.
And so we're going to keep that at an arm distance. And we create this us and them kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
like Erica was saying, a narrative.
Yeah.
That makes you feel comfortable
Yeah.
with the situation that this person's sitting here on the street corner.
Yeah. And a lot of times the homelessness that we see is only a sliver of the reality of homelessness. Like we don't realize how many people are living in their cars or how many people are living at Motel 6 because they have challenge, they've been evicted. Now they have barriers to getting into housing, but they have incomes, but nobody will rent to them. That's homelessness.
Yeah.
And that's happening to people all the time, every day. A lot of people are facing that experience through this last recession where they don't have good credit anymore. They were evicted because they lost a job, and now they're people just like you and I who are just really struggling getting a roof over their head.
And especially because the housing market, we live in a tough housing market area where, so that adds to the pressure even more.
Yeah.
So, and people don't think of it. They think of it as a very black and white issue, It's that person that is mentally ill. We've talked about it. It's this, that, and the other, but it's not someone who's trying.
Right.
And I think that's the narrative we tell ourselves to be okay with it.
I really think it is. It's a list of reasons, the perceptions that people come up with. In some ways, it's a list of reasons in their head why that will never happen to me.
Right.
Right. Well, that person has X, Y, and Z going on, and I'm never going to do X, Y, and Z, so I don't have to worry about that.
Right. And it kind of goes back to the narrative of romancing the hobos. Is that probably those children you were talking about that you've had the stories with the romance? Their parents were probably telling them, well, that's the person they chose this life. They have the freedom. They're not tied to a job like your father or your mother. They have the freedom to jump and go wherever they want to and see the world type of thing. And in their mind, it romanticized it.
Yeah.
Now, we're not romanticizing it, but we're creating a narrative that helps us deal with it.
We've got our own perceptions.
So we feel okay.
I have some interesting statistics. So in 2013, King County had the largest homeless population in the nation.
Wow.
And I don't think people are moving to King County because the weather's so great.
No.
These are people who are from here. And so that tells me that that's a big problem. 35% of those people were unsheltered. And, I'm sorry. The HUD, the U.S. Department for Housing and Urban Development, reported that at that time, 610,000 people were homeless in the United States. And of all those people in the United States, 35% of those people were unsheltered, and 23% of those people were under the age of 18.
Wow. Oh, man.
So in the whole nation. So, and we're, that 2013 wasn't that long ago.
No.
We're at the top of the list for homelessness. And so
that's
Issaquah is in King County.
Right.
This is a
I mean, to be completely honest, just not having any idea of any of those statistics, it's absolutely shocking that King County led the nation. Knowing that the Seattle metropolitan area's economy rebounded quicker than most places, and it feels like we're doing better than most, and right there a statistic is telling you, no, we're not. We're failing a area of our population. It's quite a shocking statistic.
And it's not. I don't think it's getting better because every year the King County Coalition to End Homelessness does a one-night count in January. So volunteers go out in different communities and count people who are sleeping in their cars or sleeping in doorways. And this year was a 21% increase from 2014 numbers.
Oh, man.
And from 2013 to 2014, it was a 14% increase.
Wow.
So at the times when we kind of feel like we're bouncing back from the recession, clearly our homeless number and people sleeping outside unsheltered is going up and up and up.
That's a tragic number, really.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Really is.
There was a total on January 23rd, 2015, 3,772 men, women, and children sleeping outside.
Wow. That's an uncomfortable number.
Yeah.
It really is. So where do we go? And where does I know it's a battle that you're a part of every day. You live this every day. So if I'm just a person that lives in Issaquah that's sitting here listening to this and going, that's as shocking to them as it is to me. What's a path to help? What is a homeless person? Let's take a homeless family. What are their options right now to help? What's out there that helps gets them on the right track to move towards getting a place to stay?
Yeah. That's a good question. So there are several nonprofits and resources in King County that can and do help. It's not always a fast process, though.
Right.
It's usually not fast enough for somebody who is sleeping outside. But calling 211 is a great resource. Plugging into any of our nonprofits will hopefully get you connected with the right resources that you need. So going to a local food bank, going to walking into a low-income housing program office like the YWCA, Friends of Youth, just connecting with some nonprofit that you feel safe. And
let's refresh people if they don't know what 211 is. Maybe explain to them what 211 is.
Yeah, 211 is our regional resource line. So people can call there, or you can go to their website and access information on local resources, food banks, shelters, all kinds of information. But that's where you would call to find out where there's availability in shelters. So if you were going to be homeless tonight, you could call 211 and they'll let you know where shelter bed opens are and how to get there.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's good to know.
But the sheltering's short-term fix. And so one of our biggest challenges in King County is what's the long-term plan for getting people into permanent housing faster? Right, yeah. Because the longer they're in the homeless or shelter system or the transitional housing system,
I think the harder it is.
The harder it is. It's hard to create that stability. It's hard to get a job when you're in a shelter. It's hard. You've got all of your belongings. You're packing them in and out. You can only stay in shelters.
Really. It's just a process of survival. Instead of moving on
and thriving,
you're just going, okay, I stayed here tonight. Now I got to get here. Now I got to get here. So now it's just a shell game. Right. That absorbs your existence really in a lot of ways. Right.
Yeah, and in between here and there, what am I going to eat? How am I going to get a shower? Like, what am I going to do with my stuff?
What are my kids going to eat?
How are my kids going to get to school? Like, this whole thing. Yeah. It gets really, really complicated. And so one of the myths about homelessness that people see and think is, there's a laziness factor to it. Right. That is such a myth. Like, when I think about all of the steps that it takes to get yourself up in the morning, to figure out all those important details to get your basic needs met.
Every day.
Yeah, versus just rolling out of bed and opening your refrigerator. Like, that is a challenge.
Right, and going, oh gosh, I don't want to go to work today.
Yeah, that doesn't equal laziness to me at all. And so you asked earlier, like, what do we do? How do we know? And my first kind of call to action is, like, let's think about this differently. And let's look at people from a kind, loving place and recognize that they have a story. Right. So when you see somebody who may be, looking like they're facing some challenges or homeless, smile. Yeah. Treat them like a human. Say hi. Yeah. Don't cross the street. Don't be afraid.
Right.
Because somebody is living in a situation where they don't have a roof over their head. I guess my second call to action would be to get engaged and get informed. There are some great Facebook pages out there, some great nonprofits that have a lot of really good information about homelessness, and you can volunteer and donate and share your time and resources.
If they want to get involved locally, what would they do? What would they do here in Issaquah?
Well, contacting the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank, checking out our new awesome website would be a great place to start. And
what's the website? Just so everybody knows.
IssaquahFoodBank.org.
Great.
Very easy. But there's other great nonprofits that help families who are struggling, like Eastside Baby Corner, Eastside Friends of Youth, the YWCA. So just wherever your passion lies, like, get engaged.
Yeah.
We live in a community that is so extremely divided. We have families who have a lot, and we have families who have very little. And man, we could do a lot if we just are open and kind of create a really good safety net for people who might be slipping through the cracks.
Right. If we could connect those two groups a little bit more, I think it would go a long way to helping everybody out.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, in a way, it feels like doom and gloom to a certain extent, but there's some hope there. I mean, there's hope with help, right? With people getting involved. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to someone getting up off the couch and making a phone call, volunteering some time, donating a little bit of money, understanding. And I think one of the things that you said that really resonated with me was treat people like human beings. Connect with them. Look a person in the eye and give them a smile.
I think that one of the most powerful things that Corey talked about at the opening of the exhibit, which was incredible. I mean, we had almost 60 people there, so the room was completely packed. Kind of the call to action that Corey made at that time was question your perceptions. And that's something that's so easy to do. You don't even have to leave your couch, or the front seat of your car, which is where a lot of our perceptions of people without homes are created.
True.
So, and I think that the people who were there that day left feeling hopeful and engaged and really ready to question their perceptions. I think one of the things that was so amazing about the opening is just that there were so many people coming from so many different angles of the conversation who got together in one place. And there was really a lot of passion in the room, and it was really very exciting. And I got the sense that people left that day with the intention of, for starters at least, questioning their assumptions. And we had a lot of people asking for additional information afterwards too. So that was good.
That's really good. And hopefully if people listen to this podcast, we can leave them with that same thing.
Yeah.
Question your perceptions. That is a great term. Challenge yourself to move to action. That's really good. A lot of great information has been given today. We've heard some historical stuff about hobos in Issaquah, and what's the dates on the exhibit at the Historical Museum, Erica?
The exhibit is going to be open through September 15th, and it's open whenever the depot is. So that's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 11 to 3.
And the name of the exhibit again is?
Hobos and Homelessness, and the art's by Sean Dahl.
Okay. And then, Corey, if someone hears this and gets a call to action and wants to do something and change their perceptions, what's the best way to do that?
They can call Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank, or I highly recommend checking out our new website at IssaquahFoodBank.org. And all of our information is on there.
That's great. And the phone number for the clothing bank?
425-392-4123.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for both of you guys coming in today. It gave me a lot of food for thought. Maybe it'll give me a call to action. I'll definitely take this information home to my home and talk to my kids and my wife and my family about it. I would like to thank you both for joining us today and sharing this information with the Issaquah community. We'll see you next time on Uniquely Issaquah. Stay unique.